In the American heartland, there are towns where everybody knows your name, where church bells faithfully mark Sunday mornings, and neighbors still wave from their front porches. These are places where trust runs as deep as the roots of ancient trees, and Independence, Missouri, was exactly that kind of town, where life moved at a steady, comfortable pace. It was a place where people held a firm belief in God, family, and community. But as you're about to learn, even in the most devout communities, a profound darkness can hide behind the most trusted of faces. This is the true story of Randy Stone, a devoted husband, a loving father, a respected businessman, and a man whose deep faith in his church would ultimately lead to his final, shocking betrayal. Randy Stone was born on June 14, 1967, in Kansas City, Missouri. Raised by his parents, Leonard and Clara, Randy grew up with strong Midwestern values and an exceptionally close bond with his mother. Those who knew him described a man of stark contrasts. He was tough on the outside, but incredibly sensitive on the inside. The kind of guy who could bench press his own weight at the gym, only to come home and write poetry for the woman he loved. After graduating high school in 1986, an 18-year-old Randy did what so many young men of his generation did. He joined the Marine Corps. For almost 4 years, he served his country with both honor and distinction. But when his service came to an end, Randy's heart called him back home to Kansas City, back to the familiar streets where he grew up, and back to a girl he had known for most of his life. Her name was Teresa Greenewalt. Teresa, born in 1971, was a friend of the family who lived nearby. The Stones and the Greenewalts had been acquainted for years, their families connected through the tight-knit bonds of their community and mutual respect. When Randy came back from the Marines, he and Teresa reconnected, and what began as a simple friendship quickly blossomed into a serious romance. Teresa was known by everyone as attractive and charismatic, with a flirtatious personality that naturally drew people to her. For Randy, she was simply everything. After dating for just 7 months, the couple got married in 1990. Since they were both devout Christians, a church wedding wasn't just important, it was essential. It was a sacred vow made before God, witnessed by their families, and blessed by their faith. Shortly after their wedding, their family started to grow. First, they welcomed their son, Michael, and then their daughter, Miranda. Randy dove into fatherhood with the same fierce dedication he brought to everything else. He was a hands-on dad who never missed a school play, never forgot a birthday, and always, without question, put his family first. But Randy's focus wasn't only on his family. He was building something for their future. In 1997, he launched his own insurance office in Independence, Missouri, as an agent for Farmers Insurance. For over 13 years, Randy worked relentlessly, building a reputation as the most successful insurance agent in the area. A natural talent for connecting with people, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right for his clients. Managing the office's administrative tasks and interacting with clients. Together, they built a life that looked absolutely perfect from the outside. They were financially stable, solidly middle class, and from all appearances, completely in love. Anyone who saw them together noticed they were never shy about public displays of affection. Randy would always be holding Teresa's hand at church events or pulling her in close at community gatherings. Some would later say he flat out worshipped her. They really seemed to have it all. But there was something that mattered even more to Randy and Teresa than worldly success. Something that served as the very bedrock of their identity as a couple. That something was faith. It was the foundation of their entire world. And at the very heart of that faith was the New Hope Baptist Church in Independence, Missouri. Randy wasn't just a member. He was a pillar of the congregation. He drove one of the church's Sunday school bus routes, picking up kids every single week to make sure they had a chance to hear the Word of God. He also taught Sunday school classes, sharing biblical stories with genuine enthusiasm and care. And because Randy was great with numbers and always willing to lend a hand, he served as the church's minister of records, and sat on the finance committee, ensuring the church's money was managed responsibly. Teresa also contributed in her own ways. She was in the church kitchen, whipping up meals for fellowship dinners, and she sang in the choir, her voice soaring right along with the congregation's hymns. She even organized church events, bringing everyone together to celebrate their shared faith. The Stone family was, by all accounts, exactly the kind of family every church dreams of having in their congregation. But there was another family, just as devoted to New Hope Baptist Church, the family of Pastor David Love. David Love was born on March 13, 1960, into a long line of missionaries. Ministry wasn't just a calling for him, it was in his blood. His entire family had been dedicated to spreading the gospel for generations. So, after high school, David went on to higher education and eventually entered the ministry himself, becoming the pastor of New Hope Baptist Church in 1999. At the age of 38, Pastor Love was well known for his captivating sermons and his magnetic personality. He just had a way of making the scriptures come alive, of making people feel truly seen and understood. Members of the congregation looked up to him and trusted him. They confided in him. David was married to a woman named Kim Love, who he'd met back in college. They got married on June 26, 1982, and they went on to have 3 children together. Kim was described as being chatty with a thick Southern accent, a devoted wife and mother who fully supported her husband's pastoral duties, and was a constant presence at church activities. On the surface, the Loves looked like the picture-perfect pastor's family, but as we all know, looks can be deceiving. Before he came to New Hope Baptist Church, Pastor Love had led a congregation over in Virginia. But sources suggest he didn't exactly leave on his own terms. There were whispers about financial disagreements, about money that had just vanished. Word was, $30,000 had gone missing, and even though they tried to sort it out, David couldn't give a straight answer. In the end, he resigned. But back in Independence, Missouri, at New Hope Baptist Church, nobody knew about what happened in Virginia. Or if they did, they chose to believe in second chances and redemption. After all, isn't that what church is supposed to be all about? Kim Love would later remember that when they first got married, David treated her like a queen. But over time, something shifted. She found herself having to keep an eye on other women in the congregation, women who were obviously interested in the handsome pastor. And what was more troubling, David didn't always seem to brush off their attention. Kim had a gut feeling about one woman in the congregation in particular, a woman who seemed to have caught her husband's eye a little more than the others. That woman was Teresa Stone. The first real sign that something was off came in 2004. Teresa got pregnant. It should have been a joyous occasion, a blessing to celebrate. But there was one massive problem that nobody could ignore. Randy had gotten a vasectomy. Now, for most guys, this news would have set off immediate alarm bells, suspicion, anger, a full-blown confrontation. But Randy Stone wasn't most guys. He was a man who loved his wife unconditionally and trusted her without a doubt. So, Randy convinced himself the baby was still his. He figured, after all, vasectomies aren't always 100% effective, and he'd skipped his follow-up appointment after the procedure. Surely that meant a pregnancy was still on the table. So, Randy chose to believe. But tragically, Teresa had a miscarriage. The pregnancy was over, and with it, any chance for a definitive answer about who the father was. But the questions didn't just go away. By 2008, those whispers had grown into a roar he couldn't ignore. Randy then made a decision that absolutely shocked everyone close to him. He announced he was planning to resign from New Hope Baptist Church. The reason? Randy was convinced that Pastor David Love and his own wife, Teresa, were having an affair. When Randy confided in someone he trusted, they tried to talk him out of it, assuring him that his accusations were just ridiculous. Teresa loved him deeply. Anyone with eyes could see that. And Pastor Love? He was a man of God. He would never betray his congregation, his calling, or his faith in such a terrible way. People trusted David Love. They respected him. They thought the world of him. Faced with all this pushback, Randy started to doubt his own gut. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe it was all in his head. So, Randy stayed at the church. He kept his family together. He tried to rebuild the trust. And then, in a cruel twist of fate, when Teresa caught Randy watching some adult material, it was none other than Pastor David Love who offered to help. David suggested they start weekly counseling sessions, private meetings where Randy could work through his issues, hoping David could steer him back onto the right path. Randy actually agreed, placing his trust and his marriage in the hands of the very man he suspected was tearing it apart. For the next 2 years, this bizarre arrangement continued. 2 long years of Randy pouring his heart out to David Love, admitting his faults, and seeking spiritual counsel to become a better husband, all while David and Teresa carried on their secret affair behind his back. March 31st, 2010, dawned just like any other Wednesday in Independence, Missouri. The sun came up, the streets were quiet, and folks headed off to work and school. That afternoon, when Teresa Stone pulled up to her husband's insurance agency, an uneasy feeling washed over her. Immediately, she saw the blinds in Randy's office were shut, which was completely out of character. Randy never closed them until after sundown, yet here they were, sealed tight in the broad daylight. His car was in its usual spot, so she knew he had to be inside. But when Teresa tried the front door, her unease turned to alarm. It was locked. This was even stranger. The office should have been open for business, with staff bustling about. Fumbling for her key, Teresa let herself in. She called out for her husband, but the only answer was silence. She quickly checked the storage room. Everything looked perfectly normal, but Randy was gone. A knot of pure dread tightened in her stomach as she cautiously moved toward his office. The sight that greeted her next would be seared into her memory forever. Randy was on the floor, still and lifeless, in a horrifying scene. Blood was everywhere. It formed a dark pool around his head, staining the carpet a deep crimson and splattering across the walls. Randy Stone was dead. For a moment that felt like an eternity, Teresa was paralyzed by shock. Then, her instincts kicked in. She reached for the office phone, but her first call wasn't to 911. Instead, she dialed her parents. "Randy's been shot," she cried. "He's dead." They were stunned, but immediately told her to call emergency services. Teresa finally did. But when the emergency operator picked up, her story suddenly changed. She never once mentioned a gunshot, telling the dispatcher over and over that something had happened to her husband, that he was unresponsive, and that she was completely lost. She noted some blood coming from his ear, but insisted she had no idea what happened. The dispatcher told her to wait outside for first responders, but Teresa wouldn't be alone for very long. Just minutes later, Kim Love, the pastor's wife, showed up, followed shortly by Pastor David Love himself. By the time police arrived and started taping off the scene, they asked David to get the hysterical Teresa away from the building, but Kim quickly volunteered to do it instead. David agreed, then left with Teresa's parents. Back inside Randy's office, investigators got to work, and what they uncovered painted a chilling picture. Randy had been shot once, execution style, in the back of the head. There were absolutely no signs of a fight. The killer had simply walked up behind him, likely as Randy sat working at his desk, and ended his life. It was a single, fatal shot. The murder weapon was nowhere to be found, and cash left sitting on Randy's desk was untouched, which immediately told them robbery wasn't the motive. This wasn't some random act of violence. This was personal. This was an assassination. Right from the start, this case felt different. The ballistics report showed Randy was killed with a .22 caliber handgun, a weapon detectives would soon learn belonged to Randy himself. The killer had taken the gun, right from the Stone family's home, used it to end his life, and then made it disappear. This was no stranger. This was the work of someone who knew Randy's life inside and out. His home, his habits, everything. Detectives started interviewing Randy's friends and family. And as they did, one name kept coming up over and over again in connection with Teresa Stone, Pastor David Love. More than a few people reported seeing Teresa and David together, often in situations that just didn't seem right for a pastor and a married woman from his congregation. Some mentioned lingering looks, while others had seen them in private conversations that felt far too close for comfort. But the real bombshell came from the phone records. Investigators uncovered a massive amount of communication between Teresa Stone and David Love, especially in the days right before Randy was killed. They had been exchanging a flurry of calls and text messages. The sheer volume and the timing of it all sent up immediate red flags. Detectives brought Teresa in for questioning, and it was under the glare of the interrogation room lights that her carefully constructed story began to fall apart. Initially, Teresa insisted she and David were merely friends, claiming he was just giving her pastoral counseling. But as the evidence stacked up against her, her story started to change. She finally confessed that, yes, she and David had become intimate, extremely intimate. The affair, as Teresa ultimately disclosed, had been carrying on for about 10 years. It all began innocently, or at least that's what she claimed. They were just close friends, the kind of bond that often forms between a pastor and a dedicated churchgoer. But over the years, that friendship morphed into something physical, and then Teresa admitted, with tears rolling down her cheeks, it had blossomed into love. For 10 years, they had stood together in a house of worship, singing hymns, offering up prayers and preaching sermons on morality, all while hiding a massive secret. But the investigation was about to uncover something far more sinister, as Teresa revealed to investigators that David had discussed getting rid of their spouses, not simply leaving them, not just a divorce, but eliminating them for good. The plan, as Teresa laid it out, was for David to murder both Randy Stone and his own wife, Kim Love, allowing them to be together without the messiness of a divorce, without having to divide their assets or explain to their kids why Mummy and Daddy weren't in love anymore. It was, in the most chilling way imaginable, their final solution. Teresa's confession completely redirected the investigation, zeroing in on David Love. But when the police moved to bring him in for questioning, they found the pastor had disappeared. David Love was on the run. He had packed up his family, driven to South Carolina, and taken a job as a truck driver, attempting to fade into the background. But in today's digital world, true anonymity is almost a fantasy. Police tracked his every move using cell phone pings and credit card transactions, slowly assembling a digital breadcrumb trail that led directly to his hiding spot. Tips from people who recognized him from the news bolstered what investigators already suspected, helping them pinpoint his exact location in South Carolina. On April 15, 2010, only 2 weeks after Randy Stone was killed, authorities located David Love. There was no high-speed chase, no dramatic shootout, just the quiet, methodical execution of a well-planned arrest. David Love was taken into custody without incident and transported back to Missouri to face the music. 8 months after Randy's murder, under immense pressure and staring down the very real possibility of spending the rest of her life behind bars, Teresa Stone finally decided to come clean with everything. She disclosed exactly how David got his hands on the weapon used to kill Randy. She confessed to giving David the keys to their home and providing him with the combination to the gun safe where Randy stored his firearms. She had fed him information about Randy's whereabouts and his schedule, detailing when he would be alone at the office. Then, investigators uncovered a message from Teresa that would become the single most damning piece of evidence in the entire case. "I want him dead." 4 words that changed the game. 4 words that proved premeditation, conspiracy, and a clear intent to commit murder. Teresa Stone hadn't just been having an affair. She hadn't just passively watched as her husband was murdered. She had been an active participant in planning his execution. The sole reason Teresa agreed to testify, prosecutors argued, was to get a more lenient sentence. With her on board, the full, shocking scope of the conspiracy came into focus. David Love had been Randy Stone's counselor for 2 years. 2 years of confidential sessions where Randy laid bare his deepest fears, his insecurities, and even his suspicions. And David had weaponized every single vulnerability to manipulate, deceive, and ultimately orchestrate Randy's murder. Staring down a mountain of irrefutable evidence, David Love opted for a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action. The deal spared him the unpredictability of a jury trial and the potential for a first-degree murder conviction, which might have come with the death penalty. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, making him eligible for parole only after he serves a minimum of 25 years. In exchange for her cooperation and detailed testimony about the crime's planning and execution, Teresa received a significantly reduced sentence of 8 years in prison. But during the investigation, Teresa revealed one more detail that sent a shiver down the spine of everyone on the case. She told them David had also considered killing his own wife, Kim Love. He had apparently laid out a detailed plan to murder Kim and make it look like an accident by breaking her neck and sending her car over an embankment. Thankfully, that sinister plan never came to fruition. Kim Love was just a heartbeat away from becoming the next casualty of her husband's twisted agenda. During a 2013 interview with ABC News, Kim Love and her 3 children opened up about the devastating betrayal they had endured. Incredibly, they revealed they held no grudge against David, despite everything he'd put them through. They stressed that their focus was on healing and looking to the future, instead of being consumed by anger or bitterness. Kim eventually divorced David and has since remarried, carving out a new life for herself, far from the darkness of her ex-husband's actions. Randy's mother, Clara Stone, spoke with a voice thick with grief as she remembered the son who was stolen from her. She painted a picture of Randy as a man who adored his wife, a dedicated family man whose love for Teresa was absolute. He loved her until the day he died, Clara shared, her words a testament to the profound heartbreak that shattered their family when Teresa was sentenced to 8 years in prison for her part in the deadly plot. Clara made no attempt to conceal the devastation this nightmare had caused. Their picture-perfect family life had been utterly destroyed, leaving only betrayal, deceit, and unbearable grief in its place. In time, Michael and Miranda, Randy and Teresa's children, made the gut-wrenching decision to forgive their mother. They explained that they'd already lost their father. They couldn't bear to lose their mother as well. It was an act of mercy that many outsiders struggled to understand, but for them, it was the only path toward healing. Public records show that David Love is still serving time at the Southeast Correctional Center, located in Charleston, Missouri. His first chance at parole won't come until 2036, when he'll be 76 years old. Teresa was released after serving her 8-year sentence and has since started over. Sources say she now lives with a new partner in Kansas City, Missouri, staying under the radar and avoiding any public attention. The story of Randy Stone is a heartbreaking tragedy through and through. It serves as a chilling reminder that evil rarely shows its true face outright. Sometimes it looks like a trusted friend. Sometimes it's concealed by a preacher's collar. And sometimes it's standing right next to you in the pews, singing the same hymns and speaking of faith, all while secretly plotting your downfall. Randy Stone was, by all accounts, a good man. He was dedicated to his family, a pillar of his community, and steadfast in his faith. He was a man who loved with his whole heart and trusted without reservation. And those very qualities, which should have been his greatest assets, were ultimately used against him. Thank you for joining us on Crimes in the Shadow. If you're fascinated by chilling cases from all over the globe, make sure you're subscribed for more gripping investigations.